Marcus Johnson wiped sweat from his forehead as he sat in his chair by the pool. The Arizona sun was hot, but the retired Navy commander didn't mind. After 25 years of service, including his last job as security chief on the space station, Artemis, he had earned this peace. His house in the Phoenix suburbs wasn't fancy, but the backyard pool was his special place. The neighborhood was quiet, mostly filled with other retired people and working adults who respected each other's space. That was, until Patricia Whitfield moved in next door 3 weeks ago. Marcus first saw her staring over the fence while he was swimming. She had a look of disapproval that made his stomach tight. He knew that look from his time in the military. People who thought rules didn't apply to them because they were somehow special. "Your pool chemicals are affecting my air quality," she said on day 2, without even saying hello first. "And your swimming is too early. The splashing wakes me up." Marcus nodded politely and changed his schedule, swimming at noon instead of 7 in the morning. He understood the value of getting along with neighbors, but today, as he dozed in the afternoon heat, the sound of his gate opening woke him up. Patricia Whitfield stood there in an expensive swimsuit, 2 children behind her. "We're just going to cool off," she announced, not asked. "The community pool is closed for cleaning, and since you're just sitting here, I figured we could use yours." Marcus sat up slowly, using his military discipline to keep his voice calm despite his growing anger. "Ma'am, this isn't a community pool. This is my private property." Patricia laughed, already putting down her towel. "Don't be selfish, you're not even using it right now." The children looked uncomfortable but followed their mother's lead. As they jumped in, splashing water over Marcus's papers on the nearby table, he realized this wouldn't be fixed with just being polite. The familiar feeling came over him, the calm focus that had helped him during the first contact crisis of 2041. There were always people who thought rules didn't apply to them, and there were always results for such thinking. Marcus Johnson had faced angry alien groups on Jupiter Station. He had talked with the Arcturus Collective when they threatened Earth's space defenses. Patricia Whitfield had no idea who she was dealing with. For the next week, Marcus wrote down every time she came onto his property. Patricia came over 3 more times, always when she thought he was either sleeping or away. Once he came back from buying groceries to find her hosting what looked like a small party in his backyard. "Oh, Marcus, I hope you don't mind. We were just saying what a shame it is that you have this nice pool all to yourself," she called, raising a glass of what looked like his own special wine from the lunar colony. His neighbors, Greg and Diane Peters, watched from their yard with clear worry. They had lived next to Marcus for 5 years and had never once entered his property without being invited. That evening, Greg came over with a 6-pack of beer. "She's trouble," Greg said after. Marcus told him about the latest problem. "Did the same thing to the Hendersons before they moved. Claimed their garage was partly on her property line and tried to store her stuff in it." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Has anyone reported her?" Greg shrugged. "Local police said it was a civil matter, and the homeowners association can't do anything, since she apparently knows the president's wife." Marcus smiled slightly. "I see." What Patricia didn't know, what few people in this quiet suburban neighborhood knew, was that Marcus hadn't been just any officer. His work in space security had given him access to technology and training that most regular people couldn't imagine. The peaceful retirement was by choice, not because he had to. The next morning, Marcus installed a new security system. To anyone just looking, it seemed like standard home protection gear. In reality, it contained changed versions of the non-harmful deterrent systems he had helped develop for the Ganymede mining dispute. He also made a few calls to old co-workers now working in various government agencies. Information was power, and Marcus soon had a complete file on Patricia Whitfield, including her 3 previous addresses, all left after neighbor disputes, her money-losing business ventures, and her habit of pushing her way into using other people's property. When Patricia arrived without warning the following afternoon with 5 children, only 2 of whom were hers, Marcus was ready. "I'm having a small swimming lesson," she explained breezily. "My business, Whitfield Water Wonders. These parents are paying good money." Marcus blocked the gate. "This is private property, Ms. Whitfield. You and these children need to leave now." "It's Mrs. Whitfield," she snapped. "And don't be ridiculous, we'll only be an hour. Besides, what are you going to do about it?" Marcus smiled pleasantly. "I've documented your previous trespassing. I've filed reports with local authorities, and I've installed a new security system that will turn on in exactly 30 seconds. It includes features that, while completely safe, will make swimming very uncomfortable." One of the parents frowned. "Patricia, you said this was your pool." "It's a neighborhood arrangement," Patricia said quickly, then turned back to Marcus. "You're bluffing, and you're being very selfish." Marcus checked his watch. 20 seconds. The children looked nervous now, looking between the adults. 15 seconds. Another parent stepped forward. "Patricia, I think we should go." 10 seconds. Patricia's face turned red with anger. "This is discrimination. I'll report you." 5 seconds. The parents began moving the children away from the pool. Patricia stood her ground until a gentle humming sound started coming from devices placed around the pool area. Then, with a final angry look, she stormed off, pulling her confused children behind her, round one to Marcus. But he knew the fight had just begun. 3 days later, Marcus returned home to find a notice from the Homeowners Association. It said he was creating a hostile environment and refusing reasonable community access to recreational facilities. The signature at the bottom belonged to Cynthia Wells, the HOA president, and, as Marcus had discovered, Patricia's second cousin. Marcus smiled as he read the notice. He had expected this and was prepared. That evening, he attended the emergency HOA meeting that had been called to address his violations. As he entered the community center, conversation stopped. Patricia sat near the front, a smug look on her face as she whispered to Cynthia. "Mr. Johnson," Cynthia began after starting the meeting, "we've received serious complaints about your behavior, specifically your refusal to share community resources and your installation of potentially dangerous equipment." Marcus waited until she finished, then stood calmly. "May I address the group?" Cynthia hesitated but nodded. Marcus moved to the front of the room and connected his tablet to the projector. "I'd like to start by explaining a few things about property law in this state." What followed was a perfect example of good preparation. Marcus showed satellite images of property lines, documentation of Patricia's trespassing, and security footage of her using his pool without permission, including the incident with her paid swimming lessons. As for the dangerous equipment, Marcus continued, "These are standard security measures, approved by both state rules and, interestingly enough, by Article 7, Section 3 of our own HOA guidelines." He clicked to a new slide showing the exact words from the HOA handbook. "Furthermore," he said, his voice never getting louder than a normal talking level, "I've prepared documentation of similar incidents at Mrs. Whitfield's previous homes." Patricia jumped to her feet. "This is harassment. He's investigating me." Marcus looked at her calmly. "No, Mrs. Whitfield. This is self-defense." He then played audio recordings of Patricia's threats and demands regarding his property. The room grew very quiet. Finally, Marcus said, "I'd like to point out that using an HOA position to settle personal arguments is against the rules. I've sent all this information to the State Housing Authority." Cynthia's face had gone pale. Several board members were whispering urgently among themselves. "Now," Marcus concluded, "I'm a reasonable man. I understand the value of community. That's why I volunteer at the Veterans Center twice a week and why I gave money to the neighborhood park project last year. But I will not be bullied or forced." After the meeting, 3 different neighbors approached to offer their support. Patricia had apparently been making similar demands of others, though none had stood up to her so effectively. The HOA violations were withdrawn the next day. But Marcus knew Patricia well enough by now to expect her to strike back. It came 2 days later when he found his pool water drained and a chemical smell in the air. Security footage showed Patricia climbing his fence at 2 a.m. and pouring something into the water. The pool's automated systems had detected the harmful substance and started emergency drainage, another feature not found in typical suburban pools. Marcus made 2 phone calls. The first was to his home insurance. The second was to Lauren Miller, an environmental inspector who had served under him during the Mars colony water crisis. It was time for Patricia to learn exactly who she was dealing with. The environmental inspection team arrived in protective suits, their official government vehicles lining the quiet suburban street. Neighbors gathered to watch as samples were taken not only from Marcus's drained pool, but from the soil around it. Patricia came out of her house, her face twisted with alarm. "What's going on here?" she demanded, approaching the perimeter that had been set up with official-looking tape. Lauren Miller turned, her expression professional behind her clear face shield. "Ma'am, we're responding to a report of dangerous chemicals being put into a residential water system. This is now a potential EPA violation site." "That's ridiculous," Patricia sputtered. "It's just a pool." "A pool connected to groundwater systems," Lauren replied. "Our preliminary tests show traces of industrial-grade pool cleaner at levels 10 times the legal limit. This could affect the entire neighborhood's water." By now, several neighbors had gathered, including members of the HOA board. "Who reported this?" Patricia demanded, her voice rising. Marcus stepped forward. "The pool's automated systems detected the contamination and logged it with the proper authorities. Standard procedure for any dangerous chemical introduction." This was not entirely true. Marcus had made the calls himself, but it was close enough to how environmental monitoring systems worked that no one questioned it. "You did this!" Patricia pointed a finger at Marcus. "You're trying to frame me." One of the inspectors looked up. "Ma'am, do you have knowledge about how these chemicals entered this property?" Patricia faltered. "No, I'm just saying he's making this up." "Actually," Marcus said quietly, "my security system captured footage of someone entering my property at 2:13 a.m. and putting an unknown substance in the pool." He held up his tablet, showing a clear image of Patricia climbing over his fence, chemical container in hand. The gathered neighbors murmured in shock. Lauren frowned. "Ma'am, tampering with someone's water supply is a serious offense. There will need to be a full investigation, including inspection of your property to determine if you're keeping illegal chemicals." "You can't do that," Patricia protested. "With evidence of contamination and good reason, yes, we can," Lauren replied. "We'll have a warrant within the hour. I suggest you cooperate fully." Patricia's face had gone from red to white. "This is all a misunderstanding," she stammered. Marcus stepped closer to her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You attacked the wrong person, Mrs. Whitfield. I spent my career protecting people from threats. Some human, some not. I've talked with beings who could destroy cities with a thought, and I've handled people who thought rules didn't apply to them." He smiled pleasantly for the benefit of watching neighbors. "This can end one of two ways. Either you cooperate with the authorities, pay for the damages to my property, and leave me alone from now on, or I continue letting the system work exactly as it's designed to." Patricia stared at him, finally seeing not a retired old man she could bully, but a strong opponent who had outplayed her at every turn. "The cleanup and testing will cost thousands," she protested weakly. Marcus nodded. "Actions have results. That's something I learned very early in my military career." The inspection team continued their work, carefully documenting everything. By evening, Patricia had received initial citations for illegal chemical use, trespassing, and property damage. The neighbors who had once been afraid of her were now openly avoiding her. The parents who had paid for swimming lessons asked for refunds and deleted their good reviews of her business. The neighborhood balance of power had shifted dramatically. 3 weeks later, Marcus was watching the installation of his new pool liner when a hesitant knock came at his gate. He looked up to see Patricia standing there, her usual confidence clearly gone. "May I speak with you?" she asked. Marcus considered her for a moment, then nodded. She entered but remained standing awkwardly at the edge of the patio. "I came to apologize," she said finally, "and to let you know I'm selling my house." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. "The environmental fines and the cost of your pool repairs have—" She trailed off. "Well, let's just say I can't afford to stay." "I see," Marcus replied neutrally. Patricia looked around the yard, then back at him. "How did you do it? Get everyone to turn against me so quickly? Marcus shook his head. I didn't turn anyone against you. I simply set boundaries and enforced them. People respect that even if they don't always like it. She seemed to think about this. My husband left last year, she said suddenly. He was military too. Navy. When he left, he took everything. Our savings, our status, even our friends. I thought I could rebuild by taking control. For the first time, Marcus felt a bit of understanding. By making others feel as powerless as you felt, he suggested. Patricia nodded, tears forming in her eyes. Marcus sighed. He recognized the look of someone whose defenses had finally broken. He'd seen it in young recruits, in hostile negotiators, and now in his suburban enemy. Sit down, he said, pointing to a chair. Let's talk about what happens next. The next day, to the surprise of the neighborhood, Marcus and Patricia were seen talking calmly by his repaired pool. He was showing her something on his tablet, and she was nodding seriously. Greg came over that evening, curiosity evident on his face. What's going on with you and the neighbor from hell? He asked as Marcus handed him a beer. We're working out a solution, Marcus said simply. A solution? After what she did to your pool? Greg looked shocked. Marcus nodded. Everyone deserves a second chance if they truly want to change. And sometimes people act badly because they're hurting. So you're just forgiving her? Greg asked, clearly not understanding. No, Marcus replied. There are still consequences. But there's a difference between justice and revenge. I learned that difference very clearly during the Europa incident. Greg had heard enough of Marcus's carefully edited space stories to know not to ask for details about classified missions. Instead, he just shook his head. Well, you're a better man than I am. Over the next few days, the neighborhood watched with interest as Patricia began making rounds, knocking on doors with Marcus at her side. They were not selling anything or asking for money. Instead, they were offering apologies and proposing a new community program. At the next HOA meeting, Marcus and Patricia presented their plan together. The community would create a shared recreation schedule, where residents with pools, basketball courts, or other facilities could voluntarily open them to neighbors during specific, agreed-upon times. In exchange, all participants would contribute to a community fund for maintenance and repairs. This is completely voluntary, Marcus emphasized. No one is required to share their private property, but for those who want to, this provides a structured, respectful way to do so. Cynthia Wells, still the HOA president but notably less confident since the environmental inspection incident, nodded approval. This seems like a reasonable compromise that respects individual property rights while fostering community. Patricia spoke next, her voice steady but humble. I want to publicly apologize for my behavior since moving here. I misunderstood what community means. It's not about taking or demanding, it's about voluntary sharing and mutual respect. There was a moment of awkward silence, then one of the parents from the swimming lesson incident spoke up. I appreciate that, Patricia. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. Slowly, the mood in the room shifted. By the end of the meeting, 12 households had signed up for the voluntary sharing program, including 3 with pools. Patricia's was not among them. Her poolless house was already on the market, but she had volunteered to coordinate the schedule until she moved. Marcus watched all this with quiet satisfaction. The military had taught him that sometimes the best victory wasn't defeating your enemy, but turning them into an ally. After the meeting, as people chatted in small groups, Lauren Miller, the environmental inspector, approached Marcus. Commander Johnson, she said with a small smile. I was surprised to get your follow-up call, especially the part where you asked me to reduce the fines if Mrs. Whitfield cooperated fully. Marcus shrugged. The point was to establish boundaries, not to destroy her. Lauren nodded. You always were a strategic thinker. Is that why you're helping her sell her house too? I'm not helping her sell it, Marcus corrected. I'm helping her find a more suitable place in the community. There's a difference. Lauren looked puzzled. After everything she did, you're helping her stay in the neighborhood? Marcus smiled slightly. The best resources shouldn't be wasted, Lauren. That was the first lesson of the Mars Colony Project, remember? Patricia has energy, determination, and organizational skills. She just needed to redirect them. As if on cue, Patricia approached them carrying a tablet with the community sharing schedule draft. Commander Johnson, I've input all the volunteers and created a rotation. Would you mind reviewing it before I send it out? Of course, Mrs. Whitfield, Marcus replied formally. Then, more gently, and I think, given everything, you can call me Marcus now. She nodded, a small smile appearing. And I'm Patricia. Lauren watched this exchange with raised eyebrows. After Patricia walked away, she turned to Marcus. I didn't think people could change that quickly. They usually don't, Marcus admitted. But sometimes a strong enough shock to their system makes them reassess, and having a path forward helps. The next day, as Marcus swam his morning laps, he noticed Patricia showing a young couple around her house. From their gestures and smiles, the showing was going well. Good. The smaller condo he'd helped her find closer to the community center would be much more suitable for her needs. As he finished his swim, Marcus reflected on how differently things might have gone if he'd simply escalated to match Patricia's aggression. There would have been a clear winner and loser, and the neighborhood would have remained divided. Instead, he'd found a way to address the root of the problem and create something constructive from the conflict. Sometimes the best way to win wasn't by destroying your opponent, but by helping them become something better. 6 months had passed since the pool incident, and life in the neighborhood had changed in ways no one expected. Patricia had sold her house but had not moved far. She now lived in a small condo near the community center, where she had become the unlikely coordinator of several neighborhood programs. Marcus sat on his patio enjoying the morning sun. His phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Community garden meeting at 2. Your expertise needed. He smiled. The community garden had been Patricia's idea, a place where neighbors could grow vegetables and flowers together. Marcus had provided technical advice on irrigation systems based on his work on Mars Colony sustainability projects. As Marcus walked to the community center that afternoon, he reflected on the strange turn of events. The woman who had once invaded his pool and tried to take over the neighborhood was now one of its most productive members, and he, the man who had once deployed security measures against her, was now her frequent advisor. The community center was busy when he arrived. Patricia stood at the front of the room with a tablet, organizing volunteers into groups. Marcus, she called when she saw him. We need your input on the water recycling system. As they bent over the blueprints together, Greg approached, shaking his head in continued amazement. I still can't believe you two are friends now, he said. Patricia looked up with a small smile. Not friends exactly, more like strategic allies. Marcus nodded. That was a fair assessment. They would never be close friends. Too much had happened between them. But they had found a productive way to channel their respective skills. The neighborhood works better this way, Marcus said simply. After the garden meeting, Patricia pulled Marcus aside. There's something else I wanted to discuss with you. The community pool project. Marcus raised an eyebrow. The community had been talking about building a shared pool for years, but the project had never gotten off the ground due to lack of funds and disagreements about location. What about it? He asked. I think I can get it moving again, Patricia said, but I need your help with something unusual. She explained that a representative from a government agency had approached her after hearing about their community sharing program. The agency, she wasn't clear on which one, was interested in using their neighborhood as a test case for a new type of community development project. They're offering substantial funding, Patricia said. But they want to meet with someone who has government clearance. Since I know about your background, Marcus frowned. He had been retired for 5 years and had purposely kept his past work in space security quiet. How exactly did they hear about our neighborhood? He asked. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. I might have mentioned your name when applying for a community grant. I didn't say anything specific, just that we had a retired military officer with space experience helping with planning. Marcus sighed. Let me guess. Within days, someone from an unnamed agency contacted you. Patricia nodded, looking worried now. Did I do something wrong? Not wrong, Marcus said. Just opened a door I'd prefer stayed closed. The next day, Marcus found himself sitting across from a woman who introduced herself only as Agent Rivera. They met at a quiet coffee shop 10 miles from the neighborhood. "Commander Johnson," she said, "it's an honor to meet you. Your work during the first contact crisis was exemplary." Marcus kept his face neutral. "I've been retired for 5 years. What does a former space security officer have to do with a community pool?" Agent Rivera smiled. "More than you might think. The agency I represent is interested in community resilience models, specifically how communities recover from and adapt to conflict." She slid a tablet across the table. On it was a detailed file about the incident with Patricia, including photos of the environmental inspection and records of the subsequent community program. "You're watching our neighborhood," Marcus stated flatly. "Not actively," Agent Rivera clarified. "But when Mrs. Whitfield applied for that grant and mentioned your name, it triggered certain flags. We became curious." Marcus looked at the tablet again. The agency, which Rivera still hadn't named, was offering to fund not just a community pool, but several other infrastructure projects. The money was substantial. "What's the catch?" he asked. "Minimal oversight. Occasional interviews with residents about community dynamics, and your consultation on a project we're developing for Mars colony social structures." And there it was. They didn't want the neighborhood. They wanted him back in the fold. "I'm retired," Marcus said firmly. Agent Rivera nodded. "And you can stay retired. We're not asking you to return to active duty, just occasional consultation. In exchange, your community gets the funding it needs." Marcus took a deep breath. "I need to think about this." When he told Patricia about the meeting, her reaction surprised him. "You should say no," she said immediately. "Why?" Marcus asked. "You're the one who wants the community pool." Patricia shook her head. "Not like this. I've learned enough from you to know that nothing comes without strings. And I've also learned that community has to be built by the community, not imposed from outside." Marcus studied her with new respect. "That's very insightful." Patricia smiled wryly. "I had a good teacher in seeing through manipulation tactics." Together they drafted a response declining the agency's offer, but they also included an alternative proposal. The neighborhood would document its community, sharing program model, making it available as a case study without outside interference or special funding. 2 weeks later, Agent Rivera met with them again, this time at the community center. "Your counter-proposal is interesting," she said. "My superiors are considering it." "Good," Marcus replied, "because it's the only offer on the table." After Agent Rivera left, Patricia turned to Marcus. "Will they accept it?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I think so. They're not getting what they originally wanted, but they're still getting valuable data. And this way the neighborhood maintains its independence." Patricia seemed relieved. "I'm sorry I brought them to our door." "Don't be," Marcus said. "It was a good lesson for everyone, and it showed me something important." "What's that?" Patricia asked. "That you've really changed," Marcus said. 6 months ago, you would have taken their money without question." Patricia smiled. 6 months ago, you would have deployed security measures against them." They both laughed, an unexpected moment of shared understanding. As summer approached, the neighborhood began building its community pool, without government funding. Instead, they raised the money themselves through local fundraisers, volunteer labor, and creative resource sharing. It would be smaller than originally planned, but it would truly belong to the community. Marcus contributed his expertise in water, filtration systems, while Patricia organized construction volunteers with military precision. The pool would take longer to complete, but as Marcus observed to Greg one evening, the journey matters as much as the destination. Looking at the neighborhood working together, former enemies now collaborators, strangers now friends, Marcus felt a satisfaction deeper than any mission he'd completed in space. Sometimes the most important frontiers weren't among the stars, but in the everyday challenge of building community on Earth. 1 year after the pool incident, the neighborhood gathered for the grand opening of their community pool. It was a warm Saturday in May, and nearly everyone had come to celebrate. Kids splashed in the water while adults chatted around tables, loaded with potluck dishes. Marcus stood at the edge, watching with quiet pride. The pool was smaller than what the government agency would have funded, but it was theirs, built with their own hands and resources. Patricia approached, carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. She handed one to Marcus. "Not bad for a bunch of suburbanites." "Huh?" Marcus nodded. "Not bad at all." They stood in comfortable silence watching the celebration. It was hard to believe that just a year ago, they had been enemies. Now they worked together regularly on community projects, each bringing their unique skills to the table. "Commander Johnson," a voice called from behind them. Marcus turned to see Agent Rivera walking toward them. She was dressed casually today, not in her usual formal attire, but he recognized her immediately. "I thought I'd stop by and see what you accomplished without us," she said, looking around at the new pool and surrounding patio area. "As you can see, we managed just fine," Patricia replied, a hint of pride in her voice. Agent Rivera smiled. "So you did. In fact, you did better than we expected. That's actually why I'm here." She explained that the agency had been monitoring their progress with interest. The community-built pool project had become a case study in local resilience and cooperation. Several other neighborhoods across the country were now using their model. "We'd like to formally document your process," Agent Rivera said. "With your permission, of course." Marcus and Patricia exchanged glances. "What exactly would that involve?" Marcus asked. "Interviews, some documentation of your methods, nothing intrusive," Agent Rivera assured them. "And this time, there's no hidden agenda. We're genuinely interested in how you turned conflict into cooperation." After she left, promising to send a formal proposal, Patricia turned to Marcus. "What do you think? Should we trust her this time?" Marcus considered it. "Maybe, but on our terms, not theirs." Over the next month, as summer heat settled over the neighborhood, Marcus and Patricia worked together to document their community-building methods. They created a simple handbook that outlined how they had moved from conflict to cooperation, focusing on practical steps any neighborhood could take. The handbook did not mention Marcus's space security background or the advanced technology he had once deployed against Patricia. Instead, it emphasized basic principles: clear communication, respect for boundaries, finding common ground, and recognizing when to stand firm and when to compromise. When Agent Rivera returned to review their work, she seemed disappointed. "This is very basic," she said, flipping through the handbook. "We were hoping for something more technical." "Basic doesn't mean ineffective," Marcus replied. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are the most powerful." Patricia nodded in agreement. "What we learned is that community isn't built with fancy technology or government funding. It's built through everyday interactions and respect." Agent Rivera studied them both, then slowly smiled. "You know, Commander, this is exactly why you were so effective during the first contact crisis. You understood that advanced technology was only part of the solution. The real key was understanding people." She accepted their handbook and promised to share it with other communities. Whether the agency would find it useful remained to be seen, but Marcus and Patricia had said what they wanted to say. As summer turned to fall, their neighborhood continued to evolve. The community garden produced its first harvest. The pool closed for the season with a final neighborhood splash party, and Marcus and Patricia continued their unlikely partnership, working on new projects that strengthened community bonds. One cool evening in October, they sat on Marcus's patio, reviewing plans for a neighborhood emergency preparedness program. Another idea born from Marcus's space station experience. "You know," Patricia said thoughtfully, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad I invaded your pool that day." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Really? Even with all the trouble it caused you?" Patricia nodded. "It was a wake-up call I needed. I was so focused on taking control, on filling the emptiness after my husband left, that I couldn't see what I was doing to others." Marcus considered this. "And I was so determined to be left alone that I wasn't contributing what I could to the community." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Do you ever miss it?" Patricia asked suddenly. "Space, the stations, the important work you did up there?" Marcus thought about it. A year ago, he would have deflected the question or given a simple yes or no. But their shared experiences had created a foundation of trust. "Sometimes," he admitted. "There's nothing like looking down at Earth from orbit, seeing it whole and beautiful. Or working with the teams up there, everyone focused on a common goal, everyone's contribution vital." He paused, looking around at the quiet neighborhood. "But I've found something similar here in an unexpected way. Different scale, different stakes, but the same basic principles." Patricia smiled. "Building something together that's bigger than ourselves." "Exactly," Marcus agreed. A notification chimed on Patricia's tablet, a message from one of the neighborhood committees she now led. "Duty calls," she said, standing up. "The fall festival planning meeting starts in 10 minutes. As she gathered her things to leave, she paused at the gate. "You know, you could come to these meetings more often. Share some of those leadership skills from your space days." Marcus smiled. "Maybe I will." After Patricia left, Marcus remained on his patio, thinking about the strange journey of the past year. From defending his territory against an invader, to working alongside that same person to build something meaningful. He thought about Agent Rivera and her agency's interest in their story. Perhaps there was something valuable in it, something that might help not just neighborhoods on Earth, but future colonies on Mars or beyond. The principles of community, of resolving conflict and finding common ground, would be just as important in space as they were here. Marcus looked up at the evening sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. The universe was vast, but the lessons learned in this small suburban neighborhood might someday echo among those distant points of light. Sometimes the most important frontiers weren't among the stars, but in the human heart, and in the everyday challenge of living together, in harmony on Earth or beyond.